This is one of those things that almost everyone experiences, but very few people ever stop to examine honestly, because it feels too familiar to question. You grow up believing that reaching the middle class is the finish line, the moment when life finally becomes stable, predictable, and safe enough that money stops being a constant source of stress. You're told that if you get a decent job, earn a steady income, and make responsible decisions, everything will eventually fall into place and stay there. And for a while, that belief feels true. You're no longer worried about survival, you're not counting every dollar at the grocery store, and you're not constantly anxious about whether you'll make it to the end of the month. Bills get paid, routines settle in, and life feels manageable in a way it never did before. That feeling alone convinces many people that they've arrived exactly where they're supposed to be. But here's the part that almost nobody talks about honestly. The same system that gives you comfort also quietly limits your movement because stability and freedom are not the same thing, even though they're often treated as if they are. The middle class doesn't trap people with poverty or desperation. It traps them with routines, obligations, and expectations that slowly make change feel risky rather than exciting. My name is Alex, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, behavior, and why financial rules rarely work the way people expect them to. If you're someone who earns a decent income, does everything responsibly, and still feels like progress is slower than it should be, make sure to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if it helps you make sense of that feeling. Because today, we're breaking down the middle class money trap that most people don't even realize they're inside. Here's the thing. Most people don't realize about the middle class. It's not designed to make you wealthy, and it's not designed to make you free. It's designed to make you reliable. Reliable as a worker, reliable as a consumer, and reliable as someone who keeps the system running smoothly without causing problems. And the reason this trap is so effective is because nothing about it feels dangerous or obviously wrong. When your income increases, your lifestyle quietly expands to match it, and each step feels reasonable, justified, and earned. A better apartment feels like a reward for your hard work, a nicer car feels like a logical upgrade, and additional subscriptions feel harmless because you can afford them. None of these decisions feel reckless, which is exactly why they're so powerful, because together they lock you into a version of life that requires your income to keep flowing without interruption. Over time, your financial decisions stop being about opportunity and start being about maintenance. You're no longer asking what could move you forward. You're asking what might disrupt what you already have. There's a mortgage to cover, a car payment to make, insurance to maintain, and a lifestyle that depends on everything continuing exactly as it is. And the more responsibilities you accumulate, the more cautious you become. Not because you lack ambition, but because the cost of failure keeps rising. Now, you might be thinking that this is just how adulthood works and that everyone has responsibilities, so this can't really be a trap. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable. The problem is that the middle class doesn't just add responsibility, it changes how you think about risk, opportunity, and time in ways that most people never consciously notice. At lower levels of income and savings, people tend to think in terms of survival and improvement. You take risks because you have to. You try new things because staying still feels worse than failing. And you're willing to experiment because you don't have much to lose. But once you're comfortable, the psychology flips completely, because now the goal isn't to improve your situation, it's to protect it. This is where it gets really interesting, because protection feels responsible, mature, and intelligent, even when it slowly works against you. The more comfortable you become, the more your decisions are shaped by loss aversion, which is the psychological tendency to fear losses more than we value equivalent gains. In simple terms, losing something you already have feels far more painful than gaining something new feels rewarding. That bias shows up everywhere in middle-class financial behavior. You avoid career risk because a stable paycheck feels safer than a potentially higher upside. You hesitate to invest in yourself or your ideas because losing money feels irresponsible. You delay changes, might help you long-term because short-term disruption feels too costly. And none of this feels irrational in the moment, which is why it's so hard to escape. And let's put some real numbers to this, because this trap becomes much clearer when you look at actual math instead of abstract ideas. Imagine someone earning $70,000 a year, which in many places is considered a solid middle-class income. After taxes, housing, transportation, food, insurance, and basic lifestyle expenses, that person might realistically save $5,000 to $8,000 per year if they're being disciplined. On paper, that sounds responsible. They're saving, they're budgeting, and they're doing what they're supposed to do. But now consider what happens when unexpected expenses appear, because they always do. A car repair, a medical bill, or a job disruption can easily wipe out months of progress, which reinforces the idea that taking financial risks is dangerous and should be avoided. Over time, saving becomes defensive rather than strategic. Money isn't something you use to create options, it's something you protect to avoid falling backward. That mindset makes sense emotionally, but it also explains why so many people feel stuck despite earning more than previous generations ever did. Here's what most people don't realize until much later. The middle class creates a ceiling not because income is too low, but because flexibility is too limited. Your time is already fully allocated, your expenses are already optimized for your current income, and your energy is mostly consumed by maintaining what you've built. That leaves very little room for experimentation, leverage, or asymmetric upside. And this is where a lot of frustration comes from, because the system promises upward momentum, but what it actually delivers is a narrow path where small mistakes feel dangerous and big changes feel irresponsible. You're technically moving forward, but the pace is so slow that it never feels transformative. Now, you might be thinking that the solution is simply to earn more money, and that if your income increased enough, this problem would disappear. That's a common belief, and it sounds logical, but it misses the core issue entirely. Income alone doesn't break the middle class trap if your structure and psychology stay the same. When income increases without structural change, expenses tend to rise right alongside it, because lifestyle inflation fills the gap almost automatically. A higher salary often comes with higher housing costs, better transportation, more social obligations, and greater expectations, which means that the feeling of being stuck simply resets at a higher level. This is why you see people earning six figures who still feel financially constrained, stressed, and dependent on their paycheck. The trap isn't about how much you earn, it's about how dependent your life is on everything continuing exactly as it is. The real difference between people who stay stuck in the middle and those who eventually break out isn't discipline or intelligence, it's how early they shift their focus from stability to flexibility. Instead of asking how to make their current situation safer, they start asking how to create options, leverage, and room for change. That shift often feels uncomfortable at first because it goes against everything the middle class teaches you to value. It requires tolerating uncertainty, delaying visible rewards, and accepting that progress may look messy before it looks successful. But that discomfort is also a signal that you're no longer optimizing purely for safety. This doesn't mean abandoning responsibility or taking reckless risks. It means being honest about the trade-offs you're making and recognizing when safety has turned into stagnation. It means understanding that protecting your lifestyle at all costs can quietly cost you your future flexibility. The most important thing to understand is that the middle class isn't a failure, and it isn't something to escape overnight. It's a stage, and like any stage, it has rules that work well up to a point and then start working against you. The problem isn't being there, the problem is staying there without realizing what it's designed to do. Once you see this clearly, your relationship with money starts to change. You stop measuring success purely by comfort and start paying attention to control, time, and optionality. You become more intentional about which expenses actually add value and which ones simply lock you into maintaining a version of life you've outgrown. And that's when the middle class trap begins to lose its power over you, because it only works when you don't know it's there. Awareness doesn't instantly make things easy, but it gives you the ability to make decisions consciously instead of by default. If this video helped you see your own situation more clearly, make sure to subscribe, because this channel is about understanding how money actually works in real life, not how it's supposed to work in theory. And if you've ever felt like you were doing everything right but still not moving forward, you're not alone, and you're not broken. You're just playing a game that was never designed to let you win by following the rules.